offense and defense. To me, I look at EKs and retirement plans as kind of like a defensive strategy, right? You just kind of, the money just keeps going, and it, you have something happening where it's kind of working for you in that way. But I always look at stuff as like an, offensive retirement plan where it's like I'm actively trying to find more income to just kind of keep throwing on the pile, right? So that's kind of the way I look at it.
The FIRE community. Have you heard of this? It stands
Yep.
for Financial Independence Retire Early. So it's a particular mindset and orientation perspective towards this kind of stuff, retirement, managing your money, personal finance, that kind of thing. It's definitely got its people who are just staunchly in that camp, and then it's got people who, kind of are on blast with it. But the number one thing I learned from following that community and getting into some of the concept was
it's show number 4 for the Gen X Unplugged. And thanks for being with us. Today, we're going to talk about why retirement is broken for Gen X. Pretty big topic, kind of one that I've kind of known in the back of my head for like some time now. At least I've been thinking about it for 10, 15 years. I know there's a lot of people that aren't thinking about it. So I thought it would be a great, just a great topic to talk about. Because most of us Gen Xers are preparing for a retirement that doesn't exist. That's my opinion, or at least it's not the way we were thinking about it. We looked at our parents and maybe even our parents' parents, and we were looking at them. They're like 65 years old, and then they die at 70. So it's like they only needed 5 years of retirement to. That's way oversimplifying, but anyway. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Corey. I'm excited to explore this. This has been something that's I really started thinking about and planning for, like, honestly, like 10 years ago, and getting pretty serious about it 5 years ago, which led me ultimately, like, bit by bit, step by step, into where I'm at now, which is being self-employed and investigating various ways to kind of continually reinvent myself and come up with new income streams, because I kind of saw this as a possibility that, like, the retirement, the way my dad knows it, with a pension out of the education system, was not going to be an option for me. And I'm trying to stay kind of aware and kind of present with what things are evolving versus like holding on to an expectation it works a particular way. And that's what we're here to talk about, right? And give people some new perspective and insight to, maybe open eyes a little bit, or give some practical things to go apply to be prepared for this.
Yeah, and we're going to go through, and I just, I went on Perplexity. So I'm using AI out there, people, just, for everybody that's freaking out about that stuff. I'm like, I knew a lot of these on the list, but I'm like, you know what? I want to make sure that I'm thorough and that we're catching every aspect. So we got a list of about, I don't know, what we got, about 10 things here to kind of run through. We'll go through them quick. We'll just kind of riff on them, and then we'll just take it from there. And if you're new to this channel, or if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure that you subscribe, because I'm going to be doing a lot of this stuff. I'm going to be talking with Mike. I was just talking to a gentleman yesterday that's 65 that's already gone through everything that we're kind of going through right now. And he had some great ideas and some great advice for us. So be on the lookout for stuff like that, and if you want to be on the podcast, you know what, shoot me a DM or whatever it is on YouTube, and, let's talk. So yeah, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. But thanks for watching, and let's get into it. So the first one, and this is the one that kind of spurred the idea for the show, is you had shared a post. Don't remember exactly what it was saying in the post, but mainly it was talking about like how we're living longer now. So, we might not, we're going to need more money. We're going to need, a lot more time. We have a lot more time to deal with stuff, right? So that was kind of a big one.
And Corey, just quick to already lean into that. There's two aspects that are making things a bit different in the future, say in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, versus like how we've traditionally looked at these things. So there's lifespan, right? How long are you going to live? And then there's health span. We are, obviously there's every individual is going to be different, and you're hearing different things in the media. But generally speaking, there is the option, if you live a healthy lifestyle and there's a bit of luck, right? Your health span. My neighbor is 85. He rides his bike every single day. He works in his garden. He goes to the community garden. he's walking, he's very engaged in life, right? And so traditionally, when your money needs and your lifestyle tends to drop off as you got older because you're just less active, right? You're probably not going to travel as much. You're not going to, get engaged in these different activities that all cost money. And so your money requirements go a little bit less as you're kind of eating less, you're less active, and you're just kind of, you're home and you have your basic necessities. But as we have a health span increasing, hopefully, if we pay attention to our health and take care of ourselves, we need money to fuel a more active lifestyle for longer as well. And then we're living longer. So we have a longer health span, ideally, and we have a longer lifespan. And if we want to keep an active, kind of engaged, let's say, lifestyle where we're traveling or doing various activities, then, we're going to have to maintain a kind of lifestyle expense longer than maybe was traditionally. So there's just more factors at play here.
You know what's crazy is like you and I don't sit around. This is the first time that we've actually kind of somewhat had a plan going into the podcast, but generally we just hit record and we just go, right? But it's funny that you bring up lifespan and health span, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. And I think, are you talking about the health span, lifespan that Dr. Peter Attia, is that kind of where you got that from, or did you hear it from somewhere else? Because
I know of that guy, but I have not really followed any of his content, so I don't know what he's saying about it.
Oh, okay. So Dr. Peter Attia, you can find him on YouTube, wherever, but he wrote a book called Outlive, and he just talked about like the four horsemen, he called them, like he talked about like heart disease, cancer, dementia related illnesses, and then also what's the other one? Man, my brain, it's diabetes.
Yeah.
Like that kind of information. Man, see guys, see what happens when you get in your 50s and you try to stuff too much stuff in your brain. But no, he's talking about the four horsemen, and then he was just talking about how, ways, strategies to kind of fight those and be more proactive about them. And the whole opening of the book, he talks about exactly what you're talking about. Like, and he's a medical doctor that went through the whole, system as a medical doctor and all this other stuff. And he talked about like, we've been able to extend life, but that's great. Extending life is great, but if the last 10 years of your life suck, then it's like, who cares, right? Like, I mean, if you're trapped in a hospital bed, barely alive for 10 years, well, that's not really a way to live your last 10 years, right? So the whole idea behind, or his idea behind health span and lifespan, is shortening that gap, right? Like, so sure, you have a lifespan, but like you want to shorten that gap from the time that you're like not healthy, not living your best life, almost just to the second that you just go. That would be ideal, right? If you're gonna die at all, you want to be living up until that last second. So yeah, there's a book recommendation for you guys. Check that out, Outlive. It's really thick and he gets a little dense in some areas, but I'm telling you what, it's going to change your perspective on exercise and just living longer in general. It's a great book. But okay, interesting that you heard about that from a different angle, but I mean, we all have our sources. So there you go. We might be living longer. So you know what? You better have something to do for the next, X amount of years, and a way to fund that whatever it is that you're doing. So this is kind of an obvious one, or at least it's one that you hear about a lot, and that's like the savings gap. Like a lot of people, it says the median retirement savings for a Gen Xer is only $40,000, and they estimate you need about $1 million. And they say like 40% of Gen Xers don't have any savings at all. Those are kind of like some statistics. They've been around for a while. But that's why we kind of talk about, thinking about like some side hustles and having, building what you would call like a portfolio career. So you have plenty of income sources. You can kind of pivot if you need to. What do you think on the savings gap?
This is another, like I said, this is a topic, fortunately, I came across and kind of got interested in, like I said, really like 10 years ago. And I got into it from this. It's a thing. It's got a big groundswelling. At least it did. I don't know how popular it is anymore, but the FIRE community. Have you heard of this? It stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. So it's a particular mindset and orientation perspective towards this kind of stuff, retirement, managing your money, personal finance, that kind of thing. It's definitely got its people who are just staunchly in that camp, and then it's got people who, kind of are on blast with it. But the number one thing I learned from following that community and getting into some of the concept was like, know your number. And there are some amazing calculators out there. You can go look it up, FIRE plan calculators, what have you. And it's fairly simple. You kind of just take a high level, you can either go through your credit card statements and your expenses and like be detailed, or you can kind of take a high level. What do I spend every month to upkeep my lifestyle? Do I anticipate maintaining this lifestyle, or the cost of my lifestyle increasing or decreasing depending on what stage of life you're at, whatever. And you can come up with a number that is required to sustain that lifestyle. And that is either I need to keep generating this amount monthly through whatever my income sources are, job, career, side hustles, passive income, investments, whatever. Or the FIRE plan is really about, can you make enough investments and can you decrease your cost of living enough to where you can live 100% passively off your investments, right? And then you know what this investment amount is, and then you know your number. That is a really worthwhile exercise purely for this reason. It forces you to be really hyper aware, like, how much does my life cost me, right? And then if I were to try to live off of a passive income. So they generally use this thing called the 4% rule. You have whatever you have in your investment and it yields 4%, right? So if I have $1 million, I could get 40 grand a year, right? That would basic math. So then it's like, well, if I need, whatever, 800 grand a year to run my life, I need $80 million, whatever the math is. I can't do it in my head. But when you know that, you go, do I want to keep working that long to generate that amount of money so that I can have this passive income cover my lifestyle? Do I want to make adjustments to my lifestyle? And or the combination of, do I want to explore various ways of maintaining this lifestyle and maybe not necessarily having built up this huge nest egg that I'm just living off of, but I'm generating in an income in a way, maybe it's not passive, but the active nature of it feels a little bit more passive because I'm doing things I enjoy. And, that could be something you work towards over time. But if you have no concept of what your life costs you now, let alone what it might cost you in the future, and what, of your lifespan you need to trade in order to get there, then you're just kind of grinding away in this unknown territory. And, you'll just grind and never really get anywhere, and your life will pass you by. And I think that's what we're both about helping people avoid. And I think knowing your number is essential to avoiding that fate.
Before I talk about any of this stuff, I just want to make sure that you understand, or everybody out there understands, that I'm not a financial advisor. Far from it. So, whatever I say, grain of salt, just, in one ear, and just kind of, think about it. But like, I always think about these numbers, like, $1 million, or how much do I need? That is all great until you are sitting there and you've got and I've already known that, I already had this happen with certain friends that have gone through some serious health issues. $1 million is nothing the second that you find out you have cancer, or that you had a stroke, or that you had whatever. And so to me, and maybe this is, putting a little more pressure on myself, but it's just like, I don't know if there is necessarily a number. I've heard some people, like some more affluent, more successful people. I listened to another podcast called My First Million, and they always talk about like $10 million as being like where they can kind of coast, right? They can get there, they can invest it and do whatever they can, and that's probably a great number. But then I always think in the back of my head, like, what if I need a specialist to stay longer? What if one of my children, or what if, who knows? So to me, it's kind of like almost like, and I don't know, it's probably putting way too much pressure on myself, but I always think that, what, there just may never be enough, So if I'm going to work, like we talk about work, I always kind of think of work in two different ways, right? Like, work is the stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, and things that generate money that don't necessarily feel like work. You know what I mean? So if I can do that, then I don't necessarily have to worry about some of that other stuff, just because I'm going to just be doing it anyway. And I always try to look at myself like, if anybody out there has gone on my redefiningretirement.io, that's my blog, but I have like a free handout on there, and it just talks about like my Gen exit strategy. And I always look at things kind of like as offensive defense, because I'm like a big NFL fan. So I'm always kind of looking through stuff. Go Vikings, just started training camp today. Sorry. But offensive defense, to me, I look at in Ks and retirement plans as kind of like a defensive strategy, right? You just kind of, the money just keeps going, and it, you have something happening where it's kind of working for you in that way. But I always look at stuff as like an offensive retirement plan, where it's like I'm actively trying to find more income to just kind of keep throwing on the pile, right? So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but it feels more future proof to me to kind of look at it like that, like to realize that I'm going to always have to be bringing in some sort of income in some way, whether it's, passive, or I bought a crap ton of Bitcoin and I can just go sit on a beach somewhere because it just went nuts. Or, I'm talking to people like Mike every week on a podcast, and somehow that kind of, filters back down to some other value that I can provide for somebody in exchange for money or something like that. So I'm
So
always kind of thinking about
let's
it that way.
let's blend three concepts you just brought in here, Corey. Remember, I said there are people who are staunchly against this fire community and fire plant, and they are for the reason you just said. First of all, that they're kind of the people that are against it are hawking their own system or whatever, right? But they are saying it can create a false sense of security if someone goes, I'm going to reduce frugality is a core element of the fire plan, right? Is like get your costs down to the bare minimum. And then there's a whole community about how coupon clipping and they've saved money and blah, blah, and they can live off 10, 20 grand a year, right? And that's fine for some people. It's not fine for other people. So that's personal preference. But then they'll say, okay, that $1 million I can live off my $1 million and, I'm going to have a 20 grand lifestyle. And then they, like you said, they go on the coast and they, get out of the game a little bit. They're not generating more income. They're not looking for ways to generate more income. And then something happens. They either want to or need to help out like an immediate family member or friend or something like that. And then they're like, all of a sudden, that nest egg gets a big chunk taken out, and now they're a little bit out of the game, and they have to kind of figure out a way to kind of replenish that. So that is the risk if you get complacent and totally pull yourself out. But I don't think either one of us is suggesting that. So I'm saying there's a lot of merit and value in knowing that number, and then also continue to do what we're always, I think, suggesting, which is redefining what it means, being able to reinvent yourself. And that to me is the future proof element of this. Final piece I'll say, you brought up really important point. Pressure, the pressure we put on ourselves, and will there ever be enough? That sense of like, will there ever be enough? And that like internal pressure of like, oh my God, I got to produce. That is also something I think we all need to investigate. Knowing the number can satisfy that a little bit. But then there's this also thing of like, you know what? I have the mindset and I have the ability that I can start over from zero at any time and I will go figure things out, because the real truth of the matter is, Corey, all we know are things are changing and they seem to be changing faster. And what's going to happen with 401ks and the rules around those. And, obviously pensions are already done, where investment vehicles are going to go, where the monetary system is going to go from dollar to crypto to whatever. We just need to be able to adapt and be resilient as much as possible. And once we have the confidence that we can be resilient and reinvent, then we're kind of like setting ourselves up to like, I'll do what I need to do. And hopefully that kind of can alleviate any pressure of like an unknown future.
Yeah. It's just set yourself up so that you have options and that you have the choice. Like maybe you do reach your goal, whatever that number is, maybe you reach that, but you know what? Maybe you still want to keep working and you want to keep doing stuff. I just talked to a gentleman yesterday. He doesn't want to stop working. He's 65 and I really can't wait to get him on the podcast because he had a lot of real insight. He was like, I don't want to call him a grandpa. That would be really bad, but you know what I mean? He's like the elder guy that you listen to and he's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. But he was just talking about how nice it is to have options, right? He didn't want to just stop and watch TV the rest of his life, right? He's still doing stuff. He's still out there doing it. And I think as long as you give yourself that opportunity, that's really what it's all about. It's just like, 401k, which is another one that's on our list. We're the first generation to rely on self-directed 401ks instead of company pensions. So, we get the full burden, we get the risk for that individual. But what is a 401k? A 401k is a whole bunch of stocks in one portfolio, right? Like if you look at, what I call the offensive retirement strategy or offensive retirement planning, it's kind of the same thing, but you're doing it by finding income sources or creating multiple income sources. It's no different than a 401k. It's just, a little less passive, I suppose. It can still be passive, but that's a whole other topic. So yeah, for the 401k experiment generation, the other one, and you touched on this a little bit, was we called it the sandwich generation squeeze. They're
Mm.
financially supporting both aging parents and their own children, forcing them to sacrifice their own retirement savings. And I know this one from some of my friends. My wife kind of has a little bit of this kind of happening already, a little bit with one of her parents. So it's already starting to touch me. And I know there's plenty of people out there. I've heard this in comments on Facebook and other places where I'm kind of throwing these topics out there, that this is definitely a big deal for some people, having to take care of your parents. I mean, you didn't really think about that, when they were talking about retirement and all this stuff over the years. Nobody was sitting there saying like, you're gonna have to take care of your parents, because you just kind of assume that your parents are gonna have it kind of figured out, right? Like, but not necessarily the case, because they didn't know either, right? This whole idea of retirement, honestly, is kind of a new concept over the last, maybe 100 years. I'm trying to think, I don't think Ben Franklin and George Washington were thinking about their retirement, but I could be wrong. Maybe they were, but I think it's a pretty new concept, and they were learning too. And now, well, we kind of got to deal with it for some people, for some of the parents that didn't.
No, I think I'm glad you brought it up. I think well, again, whatever sphere I'm in, it is very common. It's a real thing that a lot of people are faced with now that, yeah, like we said, is like no one hands us a life script and goes, this is how it's going to go, right? We're all just figuring it out, and we want set ourselves up to be able to figure it out and be nimble with, what we're involved in as best we can, because things like this come our way and we go, nobody told me that. Right. Like, this is now something I have to deal with. And it is a challenge because it erodes our expectation. The life script we kind of thought we had, where it's like, all right, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to kind of get some particular type of job that, was promised a particular type of future, and that can set me up. And that setup seems to keep getting further and further away because things like this happen. We have aging parents, whatever the situation may be, that it's a medical situation that costs more. They need to change their living environment. So whether you need to get like assisted living or get them into a new house, like already my parents are challenged with a 2-story house, right? So now we're looking at like, that's not really working. My dad has diabetes, affects his mobility. So it's like, we're trying to figure out what that looks like, right? And that was kind of unplanned for, right? And that these are the things that are most likely going to keep coming at us, which is why I keep beating this resilience drum, because it's like the more life doesn't turn up the way we expect it to, the more we're going to feel that pressure and stress. But if we expect change, if we expect things to kind of go a bit differently, and we can keep rolling with the punches, that's the thing we have to keep on top of. Because if we just fight what's going on, it's going to feel a lot more stressful. I'm not saying this is easy either, but it's the whole point of why we have these conversations, is to try to get people a little extra awareness and perspective of what they might need to be thinking about and planning for.
Yeah, definitely. It's it always will come back. Even when you think you have it all figured out, you're gonna have those days when you're just like, you're like, oh no, I got to do this now. So, but you slowly kind of figure out how to kind of talk yourself off the ledge, once you kind of get used to it, I suppose. So yeah, so the next one is, they call it Social Security uncertainty. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to be depleted by 2033, potentially leading to benefit cuts up to 20% just as they begin to retire. And this one, to me, I feel like since the 90s, I mean, and maybe this is the cynical Gen Xer in me, but it's like, I've been hearing about this one pretty much my entire life, right? Because everybody's like, "Oh, I ain't gonna be around when you get older." I'm actually surprised it's still going, as long as I've been hearing about this. So to me, it's not necessarily like, "Oh my God, nobody told me this," because I feel like it's kind of already been in the ether for a big chunk of my life, honestly. So
To my knowledge, Corey, and maybe we're going far afield from what either of us know, but there hasn't been a government statement that says, they're dwindling out Social Security, right? This is pontification and future
yeah,
kind of just projection, right?
yeah. I mean, this is I could probably scroll up here and see if there was a little bit more information on
The
that.
only reason I bring that up, because I'm saying I've heard that, and quite frankly, just my mentality is probably because I did grow up hearing like, it's going to go away, it's going to go away. I don't know enough about it. We're going far afield. We should come back onto things we we know a little bit more about. But I think that'll be a pretty fundamental change in like our culture at the US, because that has been something we've all contributed to and people are relying as they get into retirement. So I think without creating a major upheaval, that would need to be something well planned out and orchestrated so people can plan accordingly. I don't think it's going to be like, hey, just all of a sudden Social Security is gone. I mean, who knows, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
nonetheless, it is just another example of to be more self-reliant, to be more resilient, to not be completely dependent on that, and just plan for the ability to sustain your life in a way in which you either have a nest egg and or can generate some income in a way that feels aligned to your life and your lifestyle, right? It keeps coming back to that.
Glad you brought that up because I never thought about it that way because I've been so used to hearing it. So it is more of an anecdotal because I'm just like looking at the sources right now. This is like here's an AI lesson for everybody. Perplexity goes out there and it just finds all these sources. And I'm just looking at the sources of the information that I'm looking at for the Social Security uncertainty. One of them is Investopedia. Okay. Probably somewhat credible. U.S. News and World Report. Who knows? They have bills to pay. And Fortune magazine. Oh, those are there. And I probably, if I really wanted to make this an even better prompt, I would probably look for like academic papers, like I would scrape like academic. So anyway, yes, grain of salt with that. But I guess the one reason that I just riffed on it in the beginning was just because it's something that I always feel like it's always been in the ether. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I just found out about this now. Nobody told me this. It's like, I haven't been expecting it at all. So to me, it's kind of like a bonus, it's like, oh, great. If I get it, great. If not, well, hey, I mean, I shouldn't have been planning for it in the first place. Another one here is career disruption. Ding, ding, ding. Exactly what we've been talking about for the last X amount of podcasts. Many face mid-career displacement due to automation and changing job markets, preventing them from reaching their peak earning potential, which I don't know if I agree with that last statement because you know what? The automation and the changing job market actually might force you into your peak earnings potential if you kind of figure this stuff out and you listen to, smart people, like
Yeah.
you might find it outside of what you thought you were going to find it in. So
this is another interesting concept for you. So I've heard two flavors of this. One is this is just my bias and what I hope happens, but there is this overreaction to big companies, especially tech companies, going, oh my God, this AI can figure out so much. You can automate so much of this mundane stuff. And we're dropping, like Microsoft dropped 10,000 jobs, Amazon dropped 10,000 jobs, Google, blah, 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 right? You hear all these. And they're just basically trialing, like, what can we get done? They don't know the effect on their business until like a year or so, right? As these changes take place. And there is like this angsty period right now where companies are seeing what AI can do. They're seeing what costs they can reduce. They're seeing what headcount they can reduce. And if it sticks and it's effective, then it could be permanent. But the likely scenario, again, this is anyone's guess at this point, is that at some point there will likely be some need of like, okay, we need to bring humans back in to do something. But what period of time that is, if it happens at all, is the big question, right? So it's like, is that a 5-year span, a 10-year span, right? So that's one window like that. If we're optimistic and say like, okay, automation is getting its heyday right now and it's having an impact, but at some point, more human jobs are going to be brought into companies and it won't be permanent replacement. We don't know. Let's say it's a 5-10 year span. The other thing is this ability to catch this little wave of like using AI to create a new business, to create a new service, to create a new product and do it as an individual because it can run marketing for you. It can, write content for you. It can do strategy with you, all these types of things. There is a small window where it's like, if you get on that right now, you can probably find a way to play around, learn some things and generate some income. But in 5-10 years time, that window's probably closed because creating a business through AI is going to be like doing a Google search at some point, right? Like you and I both watched that video from what's his name, Chris Corner, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Who kind of, ran up kind of 6 agents, doing, several business tasks for him, right? And so as people naturally become proficient in that and it becomes more natural language communication with these tools, then there's a world where anyone spinning up a kind of service or business, almost like the way we're all so familiar with running Google searches. So we're in this weird time where, yes, our job might get disrupted, but we also, if we're willing, again, to just put ourselves out there, try some things, experiment, and just be, maybe we'll feel some fear, but like just go for it and try to run some experiments with this stuff. We could, learn and make some money, but eventually it is likely that a lot of people will be doing that. And then it's just going to be very competitive, and who knows how that plays out.
I mean, this has been kind of happening through my lifetime. We've had all kinds of stuff disrupting. And I think when people freak out, like, oh my God, we're all going to lose this. And I totally understand that. I'm not taking anything away from anybody that has been disrupted at this point. I know there's plenty of people that are, losing their jobs right now, graphic designers and programmers and a lot of these people, so I don't want to take anything away from them. The thing I would like to kind of point out, though, is this has been happening. I think the only issue has been like the speed at which it's happening, right? So that's why it's super important for us to kind of be flexible. I mean, we can go back to, this is always like the cotton gin or whatever, like when people were freaking out with the Luddites. You remember that whole story? That's like one of the legendary disruption stories that everybody uses, like how they rebelled against the cotton gin, but, or for the horse in the car, right? Like the car went from, the car got rid of all the people that used to go around scooping up horse crap on the streets of New York to now they don't have jobs. It took all these people, blacksmiths that were making horseshoes and people that were putting the horseshoes on and stable boys, and all these people were all eliminated by the growing popularity of an automobile. Well, what happened is that industry, think about how big the automobile industry is now, right? You've got so many jobs that were created because of the automobile. Like every part on your car comes from a factory somewhere that has a whole staff of people selling it, making it, designing it, building it. It's just massive. And then you got the dealerships, and then you've got like those ancillary, those kind of like side ones, like a convenience store, right? It's hard to imagine, a horse-driven community having like convenience stores, like 5 minutes from your house and everywhere else along the highway, and hotels and the travel industry, right? That people can travel with their cars. So I always have to try to think in terms of that. Like, yes, it's gonna strike and hurt one thing that maybe you're working on today that's relevant, but it also is going to create even more opportunities. And I this is a quote I always think about all the time. It's like, but every solution creates multiple opportunities, more problems, and problems are more opportunities, right? So like, just understand how to solve problems and, look for those problems. And I think you're always going to be somewhat ahead of the game, especially if you understand how to solve those problems. And you know what? I always use this one too. Like when I was in 1990, when I graduated, it was like, someday I'm going to be a Google ads manager. I'm going to make a full-time living putting, ads on the interwebs. It's like, well, internet didn't exist yet. So there's that. Google was way, even further out than that was. So it's like, it just shows you, you don't have to, maybe you don't know what you're going to be doing tomorrow, but you have to be kind of keeping your eye open, looking for new problems, finding things that interest you that you can help with. And I think you're always going to be ahead of the game, and you're going to have some sort of an option. And again, I'm not taking away from people that have lost their jobs or whatever, but you know what? You do have skills, and you're going to be able to bounce back if you try and you learn and you're willing to open your mind. And
those things you said just there, try, learn, open your mind, that should almost be the mantra for this show. Because I can speak personally, like this is something, it is a weird phenomena of like psychology or psyche. Like as I went through my career and as I decided I was going to be self-employed and try to figure out my own thing, and I was like, okay, what am I good at? And it was crazy how much I talked myself out of like my skills and what I had accomplished and how much I had learned. And that's all life really is, about learning and trying, learning and trying. But I kind of had convinced myself like, oh no, it was just because I knew this person and they gave me this job. And then I kind of, figured it out. I didn't give myself any credence for like, yeah, you figured it out. You tried, you learned, you went and accumulated knowledge, you talked to people, and it's the same process. But like I had this weird construct, and I think it's common for people, is just like, oh, I just spent all this time in this career and I just learned this one thing and that's all I'm good at. And if I can't do that, then I don't have any other skill or I can't provide any other service. And it's like, the only reason you got to that place is because you put your attention on it. You talked to people, you read things, whatever, and you tried. And it's the same concept. We might have to like orient that process of like being open, figuring things out, making mistakes. It seems to get harder for whatever reason as we get older. We like, I don't know, personally again, and get like more embarrassed if I made a mistake because it's like, oh, I should have this figured out by now. And you hear the cliche, like no one has it figured out, right? But we gloss over that, but it's so true. And if we just realize the only life process we have is learning, trying, and then as best we can keep an open mind. And I think fostering those things, figuring out what prevents us from trying and what prevents us from opening our mind, deconstructing, like as we said, like our generation, it's not, we're not supposed to be doing this. Like it's for, younger generations to have like, I got freaking lights pointing at me. This is weird, right? Like, but it's like, yeah, I got to break down those paradigms and be like, well, this is what's happening now in the times. And so I can resist it and I can fight it and I can close minded to it, or I can be here with you and figure it out and learn and try and see where it goes. And like that, again, this is what I'm saying. Like, I hope is like the ethos of this show and what people are starting to go like, yeah, how can I be more open-minded? What could I be willing to learn today? And what do I need to try, even if it feels awkward, scary, embarrassing, etc. Like, I just really feel that is going to be, those qualities are what are going to be carrying people through. And they always have. We just need to acknowledge them and embrace them.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll throw in there too, and this is a slight plug for our last podcast episode, was like, you just start to run out of energy. You don't have the energy of a 20-year-old when you get to our age. So I suppose there's like this feeling of like, you know what? I just did all this. I just reinvented myself 3 times already. And now I got to think about this and, do it all over again. And, we talked a lot about that in the last podcast, so I won't go into it much, but there's also that, but there's ways to combat that. And I think that these new technologies are going to help us with that. And go back to and listen to the other podcasts. We don't have to rehash it all right here. But so the next one, and this one here is like, I'll just say it right away, crushing debt and stagnant wages. Gen X carries the highest average debt of any generation. Their income has not kept pace with the dramatic rise in inflation and the cost of living. And it's like, I've had all of this and I've been able to overcome this. And I shouldn't say I should say we, because my wife was involved very pinnacle in that situation, at least the second time around. The first time when I was in my 20s, you'd always get this, I think I talked about this on the other podcast too, but it's like when I think around 1991, 92, it's like all of a sudden you were getting credit cards in the mail, like constantly, right? It's like, instead of like, keeping your nose to the grindstone and keeping the blinders on, it's like, you know what, maybe I will go get that new pair of Jabot jeans and there's a blast from the past, Jabot jeans. Maybe I will go get those because I need some because I'm going out this week and I don't want to look like a fool. But, so you had this. So I was always, I built up a bunch of debt when I was early on and thought I learned my lesson. I did pay it off. Then the family stuff that kind of happened and we ended up getting a debt too, but we were able to educate ourselves and get ourselves out of that debt. So this is one of those ones where I don't want to, I'm empathetic to people that might have these issues, the debt and their wages are the same. It's like, that is probably because they just weren't disciplined enough. Some of them just don't know. I didn't know, right? So just plain ignorance, and ignorance is such a bad word, but really it's not that bad of a word. It just means that you just don't know. This one here is kind of like, people should have known about this. You should kind of have it. And I know everybody's got a different take on it. I don't want to sound like I'm a cold, callous jerk on this one, but it just feels like I don't want to blame our retirement on this one, because for me personally, I could have done way better on this topic. And it's not something we didn't know about, like you should know that you shouldn't have $1 million in debt, and all you got to do is go hang out with Dave Ramsey for a couple of months or a year or however long, and you'll kind of figure something out. So I hate to throw the whole retirement, crisis on this one for that reason. But, and then the income, stagnant wages. Yeah, I had stagnant wages, and that's why one of the reasons why I decided to leave my job, because, I'm like, my ceiling was capped being a mechanical draftsman at the company I was at. So I knew that I needed to do something else that got me closer to where the value is provided. They got to pay a lot of other people I might have the greatest idea. I might have helped make the company all this money or whatever, for an idea or two here and there. But at the end of the day, they have to pay like a huge, first the owner's going to take a big chunk because he's very close to the value, so he gets a bigger part of the piece of the pie. Then they got to pay everybody else, right? So if I want to get more value, if I don't want stagnant wages, well, I have to figure out a way to get closer to the value. I have to figure out how to get more money and more money for, less time, so these are things that I think have been around, and it's not too late to figure these things out. Sure, it might make your journey just a little bit longer or not as great, but at the same time, like I said, if you need help with that, Dave Ramsey, he certainly helped us. And as far as like,
Good.
stagnant
So
wages,
Corey, talk
listen
a
to
little
listen.
bit more about that, because I think there are just life circumstances that, like you said, debt was thrown at us pretty freely and easily in our generation, right? Like I racked up
Student
30
loans,
grand
didn't
in
even touch
credit
on
card
that.
debt. Yeah. And so that's also a mindset thing, right? And it's also just an education thing. Like, we talked about lifespan, health span. We can talk about financial health as well, right? And there's, psychology of money. I think we talked about on this podcast too.
Oh,
It's like
Morgan
reading.
Housel, that's a great book.
Yes. So getting into those things, if you haven't already, and you said the most important thing there. We should say this consistently throughout this podcast too, is like it is never too late. Like again, keeping that open mindset, that is so critical here, is like at any given time, we can make new choices and new choices will set us on a new trajectory. We just have to have that open mindset, maybe embrace some bad habits or habits, some fears, whatever. But this is going to be the name of the game, is like being willing to lean into those things, learn and make adjustments. And if we're struggling to make those adjustments, that's when it's like, what do I need to learn, or where can I start to break down some of my habits and mental constructs? But if you can, I haven't gotten too much into Dave Ramsey. Is there like a one or two key points about addressing debt and getting started on that?
Yeah, I don't want to. My wife was more of the, Dave Ramsey, like she was hardcore, like super fangirl, you know, but everything that she did that she implemented from his books, it worked. And there's like this, like he's got this baby steps program,
Right.
and I'm really kind of off, but it was basically just, how to pay off debt. It was just a system in order to do that and just eliminate having debt. You know what? If you only make $50,000 a year, you shouldn't be paying on for a $70,000 truck, right? Like it's stuff like that. I would go check it out. If you are in that situation, I mean, I know there's a million other people out there that have like, financial advice, but he is pretty rock solid, at least for helping you get out of debt and getting you to a stable financial situation. I'm sure some of the more advanced financial people will probably have some problems with what he says, but for the basic, I need to get out of debt, I would highly recommend Dave Ramsey for
And
sure.
this is the beauty of this age we're talking. As much as it adds complexity, it can also help us. So you can shortcut reading that whole book, I'm sure, by just going to one of the AIs and being like, give me the step by step for Dave Ramsey. And then you can like give it some of your specific circumstances, being like, I have this much credit card debt, this much interest rate, this is my monthly bills, expenses, right? And have it kind of calculate for you. You probably want to be careful with putting in your personal data into these things, but you could probably upload a credit card statement. I'm not recommending you do that because personal data there. But my point is, if you gave it some pretty concrete stuff, it could probably recommend like, well, cut out Netflix, cut out this cost, cut out that cost, start putting that towards this debt. This is your highest interest debt. Start paying that off or whatever, and give you like baby steps is also really critical, because when it's giant leaps, they feel too far afield. Our mind starts to go, it's too hard, just forget it. And we get trapped in this all or nothing thinking. But baby steps are great, and use AI to your advantage here to say, like, I'm in debt, I want to get out of it. Whether you tell it to use Dave Ramsey or just whatever general, database it has, I'm sure it can give you like a plan. And you can tell it like, this plan's hard for me, make it easier, break it down into smaller steps, whatever. And then, even use it as an accountability partner. So that's where we can use this stuff to our advantage and shortcut needing to read 5 books and then go figure out how to put it in practice and then fall off the wagon and try to get back on. It can help with all that.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a good idea. Just, go ask ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or whoever your whatever your LLM of choice is, and just ask it, hey, are you familiar with Dave Ramsey and his, ways to get out of debt, whatever. Ask it something like that. The one thing I would add to that though is maybe listen to some Dave Ramsey, like some of his podcasts, and listen to some of the calls, because that's one of the things that my wife did. Like when we go on like road trips or whatever, we got the kids in the car, we would listen to a lot of that stuff. And it just helps. You might know what you need to do, but when you're listening to him talk about it and you're listening to all these different people calling with their problems, because some of them are so crazy and so out of, so wacky that it like makes yours look like, okay, well, I'm not that bad, or you know what I mean? Like you get inspiration from it.
Yeah.
Or you might find out that, oh my God, I'm really bad. But at the same time, you just hear how confident he is in helping these people. So I would definitely do that, because I do that with anything, honestly, like with anything I'm learning. I like to just immerse myself in a podcast for that particular person or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and probably to my detriment, because sometimes I end up learning too much and not taking enough action. So that's like a whole other podcast. But yeah, so definitely if debt and stagnant wages, well, now you kind of know what it is. And I had a lot of student debt too. I had to dig myself out of that and I'm pissed about that. I mean, honestly, we've really been getting shafted on that. And I would say the good thing that came out of that for me anyway, is that my kids don't have to live that situation, right? I was able to tell them, like, my daughter's going to college right now. She's funding it. We have like some very small loans, but they're not the kind of loans that are going to hang on to you for the rest of your life and weigh you down. And you know what I mean? It's just, they're not guaranteed student loans. We found other things to help her fund. She has a job. My wife and I help her. We get a couple grants here and there because of what she's going to school for. And then you have to just kind of subsidize just a few things, but they're not the old school loans that I took out that are like a freaking anchor for like, your 20s and 30s, like they were for me. But yeah, so that's one good thing that came out of it. And then the last thing before we get out of here is this is like super obvious, but this is what the AI told me. The end of traditional retirement. Ding, ding. As a result of these factors, many in the Gen X face the reality of working indefinitely, unable to ever fully retire in the traditional sense. Sure. Again, we've kind of went over this one. It's kind of repeating a lot of the topics that we talked about already today. But just plan on, if you think that you're going to have to work the rest of your life, find stuff that you like doing.
Thank you.
I mean, and honestly, that's a slippery slope. But I think that if you can,
what does that mean? Slippery slope.
A slippery slope, as in, for instance, I went hard at music when I was in 2010 because it's like, I'm going to follow my passion, man. It's like, I'm going to live the life. Well, the problem with that is that, like, it's like, here's a common scenario at a show back when I used to play, a couple times a week. It'd be like, oh, Corey, man, I just love your voice. You got the greatest voice. And that song, I Take This Ring song, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, oh, would you like to buy a CD? And it's like, are you on Spotify? I am on Spotify. Thank you for the 0.0005 cents, right? So you still have to have a marketable skill, right? You have to have something marketable. And there's a lot of people out there that found a way to make money with music, and they're doing a great job at it. But I don't think that's the rule. I think it's the exception. So I think that you still have to keep that in mind.
Okay, so this clarified. So I want to try to get at this, because I think there's a big thing. How do I say this? There's a zeitgeist. There's this thing out there that's like, what's that saying? It's like, you find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? Like,
yes.
And then there's like your passion, your purpose, and all this stuff gets mixed up into this concept that there's like this singular thing you can do, which you absolutely love inside and out. Every single moment is fantastic, and you're getting paid whatever you want to get paid for doing that. And I believe that can be possible, and I believe circumstances for some people make that clear and evident, and they get it, they achieve it. On the whole, though, I think it's helpful to break those things down into what you're saying. Pursue your passions because they're passionate and they're enjoyment. I think having passion in your life gives you, remember you said your energy drains? I think if you do things you're passionate about, forget about the money for a second, right? That passion evokes some energy, it keeps excitement, curiosity, enthusiasm in your life. So find passion, pursue passions, not because of money, right? That's just one concept I believe in. Then the second thing is start to figure out, play around with, experiment with things that you find interesting, that you want to spend time on, that are marketable, that are solving a problem. And this is where podcasts like, what's it called? The Corner Office, right? Are great because he has these cool concepts and he's not the only one that invented it. Like there's a couple cool concepts. One is run an ad, a fairly affordable ad for a concept, a product, a thing you want to sell, right? And see what clicks you get. You get like, you don't even have to have it ready to sell, right? But you can like see like, what is this generating enough interest? So you get some sort of clue without going full bore into time and money investment. The other thing is if it's more of a service-based thing, you can create an offer and create a wait list. It says like, hey, I'm contemplating this offer. Here's my wait list. Sign up and see how many signups you get. And you go, I got whatever you need, 10, 100, 1,000 signups. Now it's worthwhile to actually go create it. So there's so many things we can do with digital marketing in this digital e-commerce type world to test and learn. Do you see the distinction I'm trying to make here? Which is like, I get it. Like if music is my passion and I'm just like doing it for the passion and like I have no way to market it and it's not going to make me any money, then that's going to feel like it's falling flat. But if you can separate those two to go like, I'm going to do my music because I love it and it's passionate and I'm not worried about making money there. And I really like, I don't know, micro machines, right? To take it from our generation. And like, I want to go find, like classic packaged micro machines and then sell them on eBay. Is there a market for that? Could I like go find one and put it up on eBay and see how it does? Silly example, but you see what I mean? Like it's like we want both. So maybe they converge at some point, the passion and the marketable service, or maybe they just remain distinct, separate areas of our life that still make up the fabric of our life, but I at least want to offer that as a perspective.
Yeah. And I should say, now that you said this, I learned so many skills when I was marketing my music, and all those skills are what I eventually used for, that stage of my life. My first ever Google Ads campaign was for learning play. It was a guitar course, right? Like DVD course. And it's like, that taught me, cause I was learning how to play guitar. Well, I kind of knew, but I was getting better at it. Learn and master guitar. That's what it's called. And that's the first campaigns that I made and that I was successful at. That started teaching me other skills about building a website. Then I started doing Facebook ads. And then when I started doing my own music, then I started talking about that and an email list and all these other skills. So eventually, even though I wasn't making money per se, I mean, and I shouldn't say I wasn't making any money because I definitely was making some money, just not enough to support my family at the time with the music. But it's like all those skills were transferable into other areas, right? So like I would use this pitch all the time, and I probably already said this on the sales podcast that we did a couple of weeks ago. But it's like I would go in there and I'm like, you know what? If I can sell $500 worth of music that nobody wants music, they don't have to buy it. I know that some other person's product or service or whatever that is way more in demand, way more marketable, I can do that no problem because I learned all these other skills, from trying to market my music, promote my music and all that kind of thing. So yes, definitely you can marry those things. Yeah. And it's probably more possible these days when some of these things, I'm just saying, don't go out there, like if you're super passionate about, I don't know, I'm probably going to come up with a bad example, but if you're super passionate about Linux computer systems or some outdated, I shouldn't even say that's an outdated one, but like there's just outdated technology. Like if you're like all over that stuff, I mean, there's probably not a market out there for it. So you might be passionate about it, but like you're probably not going to make any money off of it because nobody really cares. So I always hear the three that I always hear the most. If you can do something that ties back to health, wealth, and relationships, you're going to be somewhere in the ecosystem of a marketable skill. So kind of keep that in mind, whatever.
And again, Corey, take Linux or outdated technology, or you used this example before, right? Like a office clerk or something, right? Like a transcriber or something, right? So
medical transcriptionist, my wife,
yeah,
she doesn't, her job doesn't exist anymore. If you're going to start a transcription business, I don't care how passionate you are about transcription. It's going to be a rough road for you.
Here's the two things I would say about this. Again, let's just use what's out there. If you do have this like, man, I would really love to offer this as a service. I'm passionate about it. I have some creativity around it. I believe I have some unique skill or offering, whatever. again, go out to the AI and say like, this is what I'm super interested in. This, like, what is the market for it? How would I test to see if there is a market for it? Because maybe it is just, there is like absolutely no market, or maybe there's some sort of super hyper niche like Linux coder thing that you could, like, people that want to just like tinker with it, and you could create a course around it or what have you, right? Like, who
Yeah.
knows? But we're in the age where we can get some information and test markets before going all in and spending a year and then finding out it doesn't work.
So here's the recommendation I have for that. If you want to quickly test a business idea, there's a gentleman named Noah Kagan. He's been around for a long time. He started AppSumo, and he has a book called $1 Million Weekend. So this is one you can either go check out his YouTube channel, or go get that book, $1 Million Weekend. Or again, you can go to the LLM and go, hey, are you familiar with Noah Kagan's book, $1 Million Weekend? Tell me how to, and he has this process for how to verify or to vet a business idea like in a weekend, right? And it's very simple. Yeah. So I would go check that out, because it's pretty ingenious, honestly. It's like, I'm like, God, why didn't I think of this?
Make sure you put that in the notes, Corey. I feel like these are the things that are going to be most helpful for people watching this, right? Like, hopefully we're adding some perspective. Hopefully we're giving some insight that they weren't aware of. But then things like that, it's like, go use these tools to go learn something, to test about like these concepts. I think is the most important thing, is that there are ways to test markets, get some information about, is this viable? What would I need to do to make it more viable without spending months on this stuff, right? And maybe sometimes you're like, screw it, I just want to have a go at it. And I'm in a position where I can run at something for a few months just to see what I learned, just to try, like we said, try, learn, keep an open mind. If you're in that position, I highly encourage it versus spending, and we definitely got to do a podcast, Corey, on like research, planning versus action, right? Because we could research all kinds of companies we could do and all kinds of services we could offer, and we could play all day long with AI giving us ideas. But if we never try, we never take a run at things, then obviously we're not going to get anywhere. But anyway, these concepts of like, there are ways to test and validate ideas and marketplaces in a weekend, or within a week instead of months. This is stuff we all need to be playing with and looking at.
I've been down the rabbit hole on this stuff for the last, I'm not even joking, 17, almost 20 years now. I've been reading about this stuff, feeding my brain with it. So it does come naturally to me to just throw off these ideas. And I do understand that. They call that the curse of knowledge, right? So if you're out there and you have questions, you're like, oh my God, you guys are talking over my head, or what do you mean? Drop it in the comments. We'll get back to you, and we'll definitely, help you, point you in the right direction. I'm also putting links below this to contact either Mike or myself to kind of help you if you want to explore these topics even further. So check that out. But yeah, for sure, that's definitely something that we can do. And I know we're like right at about an hour right now, so I think we probably should call her the day. We pretty much covered everything that was on this list in one way or another. Is there anything that you want to say at the last, just to kind of tie a bow on this whole thing? Or
I told you, man, it's like try, keep an open mind. I think that's got to be our theme when we talk. We gave some good places to research. Dave Ramsey, if you're, struggling with debt and want to get out of debt, like that is absolutely where your attention should be before anything else, right? And then, this idea of testing market concepts. Be passionate in whatever. It doesn't have to be what you're necessarily deriving money from right now, but go test some concepts. We got to do something to like change the game and be willing to put ourselves out there. So get started on something.
There's so much opportunity out there, people. That's like the main thing I always want to tell everybody every time I talk to them, every time we get into these discussions. It's just that, like, there's so much opportunity. You just have to start teaching yourself how to spot it, how to harness it, and all that. So just know that. So I guess to kind of wrap this up, Mike, tell everybody where they should go find you, and then I'll tell them where they can find me.
Yep. It's Mike Buccialia. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my company is MindWorks. You can find that at mymindworks.com, and that's WORX.com.
He's an X guy, people. He's got the X. No K's in Mike's world, except in your name. I guess you shouldn't say that, but So anyway, I'm rambling. The last thing I will say is like, I am Corey. I'm at redefiningretirement.io. You'll see a link in the show notes or whatever for my blog and my newsletter, because I just kind of share all this kind of stuff every week. So check that out if you can. And if you like these podcasts, like I said, I'm going to keep doing more of them. We're going to do them with Mike. I also got other people kind of showing some interest. So just make sure that you like, subscribe, and for sure, like I said earlier, comment below. If you got questions, you want to see something, you want to tell me how stupid I am for wearing a Vikings hat, and, you know, you're an Eagles fan or something, or a Packer fan, you know, like whatever, just put it in the comments and we'll straighten it out. We'll figure it out. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Anytime you spend with us is like, you know, we're super appreciative. So thank you, and have a good rest of the day. Talk to you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers, Corey.